The Wall Street Journal produced an article that went viral, sent shockwaves throughout the nation. Put his hand in this bucket. I'm telling you right now, this thing is going to be hotter than World War III for the WNBA. I ain't lying.
Everyone's chasing the wrong story. While other channels are spinning wild tales about FBI investigations that don't even exist, the real danger to the WNBA is sitting right in front of us, in black and white, and almost no one's talking about it. There's a proven legal precedent that's already been used to win in court, and if Caitlin Clark's camp decides to follow that exact roadmap, it could turn into the most devastating civil rights case in sports history. This isn't speculation pulled from Twitter threads. It's a chain of documented events, statistical evidence, and public testimony that, when put together, creates a legal nightmare for Commissioner Kathy Engelbert and the league's top brass. And it all starts with a case the WNBA thought was over and buried, but in reality, it may have just set the trap they're about to walk into. Before we even get to Caitlin Clark, we need to talk about the case that cracked the door wide open and could now blow it off the hinges. In early 2023, Dearica Hamby was traded from the Las Vegas Aces shortly after announcing she was pregnant. At first glance, it looked like a routine roster move, nothing unusual in professional sports. But Hamby didn't just take the hit and move on. She took the league to court. Her federal lawsuit alleged 3 damning things: pregnancy discrimination, a hostile work environment, and retaliation. And here's the part the WNBA probably wishes you'd forget. She won. In May 2024, Hamby reached a $2.2 million settlement with the Aces. But the money was just a headline. The real story was the legal blueprint her case left behind. Legal analysts called it a judicial precedent, a framework that proved professional women's basketball players could successfully sue under workplace discrimination laws. And this wasn't built on some complex, impossible-to-replicate legal trick. Hamby's team used 3 simple pillars. 1. Document a pattern of different treatment compared to others in the same situation. 2. Show evidence of a hostile environment that impacts the ability to work safely. 3. Prove that the league failed in its duty to protect its own players. That's it. 3 steps. And they worked. The precedent didn't just embarrass the WNBA, it set the stage for any future player who could show similar patterns. And here's where it gets dangerous for the league. Caitlin Clark's current situation doesn't just fit this framework. In several ways, it's even stronger. Now, here's where the Hamby precedent stops being history and starts being a playbook. Caitlin Clark isn't just the WNBA's biggest draw. She's also sitting on a mountain of evidence that checks nearly every box Hamby's lawyers used to win. And the numbers are staggering. According to a statistical analysis of the 2024 season, Clark absorbed 17.1% of all flagrant fouls league-wide, despite being just one player out of hundreds. The probability of that happening by chance? Practically zero. And it gets worse. The Chicago Sky alone were responsible for 11.8% of all flagrant fouls against Clark specifically. When one team's numbers are that disproportionate, it stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like a targeted pattern. And that's exactly what discrimination lawyers love. Patterns. Patterns that show someone is being singled out and treated differently from their peers. Hamby's team built their case on those patterns. Clark's legal team could too. In fact, they'd have even more statistical ammunition.
Because here's the truth. When you can point to hard numbers showing one player is physically targeted far more than anyone else, and combine that with evidence that league officials aren't stopping it, you're not just talking about aggressive basketball anymore. You're laying the foundation for a discrimination claim that could make Hamby's $2.2 million settlement look like pocket change. If the statistical data is the skeleton of a discrimination case, testimony is the muscle that makes it move. And Caitlin Clark's situation has both. One of the most revealing moments came from Sophie Cunningham, now Clark's teammate in Indiana. While she was still with the Phoenix Mercury, Cunningham openly admitted that locker room conversations often centered around how aggressively players should go after Clark. And we're not talking about casual, play hard talk. She described strategic discussions, intentionally setting a physical tone from the opening minutes, making Clark earn every inch on the floor. In employment law, that's a huge red flag. When you can document coordinated workplace hostility, you're halfway to proving a hostile work environment. And that's exactly what Hamby's lawyers did in her case. Even the media narrative is shifting in Clark's favor. Rebecca Lobo, ESPN analyst, former WNBA star, and someone who initially brushed off the targeting storyline, has now acknowledged that officiating patterns against Clark are a real concern. For lawyers, this kind of public credibility shift is gold. It's what they call expert witness development, respected voices validating your claims without being part of your team. Put it together: documented player testimony, coordinated physical targeting, and now respected analysts echoing the concerns. It's the same formula that worked for Hamby, but Clark's case has the added advantage of being played out under an intense national spotlight, with every shove, hit, and foul captured in high definition. And yet, despite all of this, the league's leadership hasn't stepped in. That's where the next part of this roadmap becomes critical: the failure of duty of care. If there's one thing that turned Dearica Hamby's lawsuit from a player grievance into a federal victory, it was this: proving the league knew about the problem and did nothing. And Caitlin Clark's situation is stacking up in the exact same way, maybe even worse. Over the 2024 season, Clark has taken some of the most blatant, high-impact hits we've seen in recent WNBA history. Kennedy Carter's blindside hit, no ejection. Diamond DeShield's linebacker-style collision, no suspension. Marina Mabrey's calculated shove, no fine. Tina Charles's hard contact from behind, not even acknowledged. Every one of those non-responses is another brick in a wall of evidence that the league is failing in its duty of care. And in legal terms, that duty is crystal clear. The WNBA, as the governing body, is responsible for protecting her players from discriminatory treatment and unsafe work environments. When they don't, they're not just failing ethically, they're creating legal liability.
The outside voices are already lining up. Sean Milne from the Wall Street Journal, a former White House staffer, went so far as to say Clark's treatment constitutes a hostile workplace and called for a federal investigation into possible civil rights violations. That kind of language isn't thrown around lightly. In the legal world, it's a signal that the foundation for a serious case is already in place. And here's the dangerous part for the WNBA. The longer they stay silent, the more powerful that case becomes. Hamby's win proved it. Clark's numbers, visibility, and media support could make it even more devastating. But what could take this from bad to catastrophic for the league is the identity-based discrimination angle. The one topic almost no one wants to talk about publicly, but everyone's whispering about behind the scenes. This is the part of the conversation most creators won't touch, not because it's irrelevant, but because it's explosive. And if the evidence lines up, it could be the factor that makes Caitlin Clark's case even stronger than Dearica Hamby's. Clark isn't just a rookie phenom. She's a straight white woman in a league that is predominantly black and openly LGBTQ. On paper, that shouldn't matter. But in practice, there's a growing undercurrent in player forums, social media threads, and private interviews that suggests it might. This isn't without precedent. Back in 2017, former WNBA player Candace Wiggins claimed she was bullied out of the league for being straight, a claim many dismissed at the time. But in legal terms, it established the possibility of identity-based workplace harassment within professional women's basketball. That's key, because harassment laws protect against discrimination based on race, sex, and sexual orientation, and those protections apply just as much to professional athletes as they do to office workers. Now combine that with Clark's reality: disproportionate physical targeting on the court, documented locker room discussions about sending a message through aggressive play, and a league that has consistently failed to respond or protect her. Even if the WNBA were to argue there's no intentional bias, impact matters as much as intent in federal discrimination cases. If a pattern disproportionately affects someone in a protected category, it's still a legal problem, and in Clark's case, the impact is impossible to ignore. This is where the legal risk spikes. Add an identity-based discrimination claim to the statistical evidence, the hostile environment testimony, and the league's inaction, and you're looking at a potential federal civil rights case that could dwarf Hamby's $2.2 million settlement. And here's where things get even more intriguing. Some believe Clark's team isn't just letting this happen, they might be quietly building the case behind the scenes. Now we step into the territory where facts meet strategy, and where the whispers get loud enough that you can't just ignore them. Nothing in this section is confirmed, but there's a persistent theory gaining traction. Clark's agent may be quietly orchestrating a long game. The idea? Let the targeting continue, let the league's silence stack up, and let every incident become another piece of documented evidence. In legal strategy, that's called building a record, and Hamby's team proved it works.
Think about it. Clark herself has been mostly silent on the issue, avoiding the appearance of seeking special treatment. Meanwhile, her teammates, respected analysts, and even political figures have been the ones raising the alarm. That's not random, that's smart. It keeps Clark's public image clean while the support network does the heavy lifting of shaping the narrative and gathering third-party validation. And it's not just sports media that's watching. Indiana Representative Jim Banks has already sent a formal letter to Commissioner Kathy Engelbert demanding answers about Clark's treatment, a sign of legitimate federal oversight interest. Now, this isn't an FBI probe, but it's the first step in how political involvement starts. Once politics enter the picture, the game changes entirely. Stephen A. Smith has even suggested that a future Trump administration could weaponize Clark's situation the same way Columbia University's $221 million civil rights settlement became a national talking point. If that happens, this stops being a basketball story and starts being a constitutional rights battle, one that plays out in both courts of law and public opinion. The WNBA has built its brand on empowerment and progress. But if their most marketable player ends up at the center of a civil rights lawsuit, and that lawsuit becomes a political football, it's the kind of contradiction that can destroy a brand from the inside out. And here's where the risk skyrockets. Political weaponization doesn't just create headlines, it creates pressure. Pressure that can force depositions, public hearings, and sponsor pullouts before a single verdict is reached. But politics are just one side of the squeeze. The other, cold, hard economics. And Clark's value to the WNBA is so outsized that every unpunished foul isn't just a legal mistake, it's a business disaster in the making. If the legal risk wasn't enough to keep WNBA leadership up at night, the economic reality should be. Caitlin Clark isn't just another rookie. She's the single biggest economic driver the league has ever seen. And the numbers are so lopsided, it's almost hard to believe. Since Clark's debut, ticket demand has exploded, forcing some Fever games into larger venues just to keep up. League Pass subscriptions have hit all-time highs. Merchandise sales featuring her name and number have surged over 600%. WNBA TikTok engagement has jumped 380%, almost entirely driven by Clark-related clips. One player has essentially shifted the league's trajectory, both in revenue and visibility. And yet, the WNBA is allowing her to take unpunished hits that put both her career and their bottom line at risk. From a business strategy perspective, that's not just short-sighted, it's reckless. Sponsors don't want to be associated with headlines about civil rights lawsuits. Broadcast partners don't want to explain to advertisers why their star player is sidelined with injuries from ignored fouls. And once those relationships sour, the money doesn't just slow down, it evaporates. Here's the kicker. If Clark's camp files a discrimination claim and wins, the damage goes way beyond settlement costs. Civil rights cases can trigger federal oversight, expose internal communications during discovery, and scare off long-term corporate partners. Even the perception of discrimination can be enough for sponsors to quietly walk away.
Right now, the WNBA is gambling its most valuable economic asset against the possibility that Clark won't take legal action. But every game she plays without the league stepping in, they're not just risking injury, they're building her case for her. And the longer that continues, the more expensive this gamble becomes. Which brings us to the most dangerous part of this roadmap.
The fact that the clock is already ticking and the timeline for WNBA action is shrinking fast. The WNBA doesn't have the luxury of dragging its feet anymore because the legal clock is already running. Hamby's case proved something critical. A player doesn't need the Department of Justice to open a formal investigation before filing a federal discrimination lawsuit. Private lawsuits can move forward on their own, and the moment that happens, the discovery process kicks in. That's the phase where lawyers get access to internal emails, text messages, and meeting notes. And if those contain even a hint of targeted strategy or double standards in officiation, the league's public image could implode overnight. And the evidence is stacking faster than the WNBA is responding. Statistical patterns that would be nearly impossible to occur randomly. Player testimony about coordinated physical targeting. High-profile incidents with no disciplinary follow-up. Growing political interest, from congressional letters to national TV debates. Media framing that's shifting from sports controversy to civil rights issue. Every one of these is a building block for a case, and the longer they go unaddressed, the stronger that case becomes. There's also the momentum factor. Public outrage works like a snowball. The longer it rolls without resolution, the bigger it gets. And once it crosses a certain size, once sponsors, lawmakers, and mainstream media are all in the mix, the league loses control of the narrative entirely. At that point, it's not about whether a lawsuit will be filed, but how much damage will be done before it's settled. Right now, the WNBA is facing a decision. Act immediately to address Clark's protection on the court, or wait until the pressure builds so high that action is forced upon them, by lawyers, by sponsors, or by the federal government. And if the signs we're seeing are accurate, that choice might have to be made a lot sooner than they think. So here's where everything we've covered comes together. We've got a proven legal precedent in Dearica Hamby's case. We've got statistical evidence that's almost impossible to dismiss. We've got player testimony, media validation, and league inaction, all under the brightest spotlight the WNBA has ever had. And now the question becomes unavoidable. Is Caitlin Clark's camp already building a federal discrimination case right in front of us? Because if they are, this isn't just sports drama anymore. It's a carefully constructed legal strategy, one that could pull in corporate sponsors, political figures, and federal oversight before a single lawsuit is even filed. The Hamby playbook shows how it works. Clark's situation shows how it could be bigger. The timeline is shrinking. Federal interest is growing. Every game adds either to the WNBA's defense or to Clark's evidence. And from where I'm sitting, the scales aren't tipping in the league's favor. So I'll put it to you. Are we watching a basketball controversy or the opening moves of a case that could rewrite the future of professional women's sports? Drop your take in the comments. I read every single one. And share this breakdown with someone who still thinks this is just about basketball. If you found this analysis valuable, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the next development in this story could land at any moment. And when it does, you'll want to know exactly how it fits into the bigger picture.